Fabulous. Okay, so I'm going to just start a tiny bit. What I really would like to do just in this test session is actually hear from everybody. And if that's as far as we get in the test run, then that's enough. I'm very happy to see Pedro here, and I'd very much like to have him maybe chat to us a bit more. So let me just quickly tell you about how this came about. I basically asked our ISCIA students how we could start contributing to universities' efforts to prepare for this health and economic and emotional fallout of the pandemic. We were hoping that we would be able to find a forum where we could actually help contribute to the CCC, which is the university's kind of committee to try to help respond. And this elicited the question that our seminar poses, and we have Gary to thank for that question. How do philosophers best respond to a pandemic caused by an unseen virus? I mean, philosophers generally often feel useless practically, so how would we best respond? And his answer was tied to philosophy's role to foster critical thinking, so kind of develop robust minds that can deal with the viral spread of disinformation, misinformation. That's certainly one of our tasks. And then other answers that came flying in on WhatsApp were an emphasis on diversity thinking, which means kind of listening to all kinds of perspectives with emphasis on listening, listening to stories. And then another emphasis was on imaginative thinking, kind of how can we think creatively about the new world that is going to have to come out of this. And I'd like to emphasize a kind of ethical dimension. It's like trying to imagine another ethos, a new ethos, a kind of combination of self, society, and environment. So that's in a certain sense what came out of, well, what maybe that's something philosophers can do. But this is an open space, and what I'm imagining for this space is something kind of similar to a Friday seminar where somebody volunteers to present something, to lead a discussion, to make some kind of contribution, to trigger something in other people. And potentially then, if somebody volunteers to take this space and do something with it, that would be fabulous. And what we could do then is share some of the more text-based and picture-based information on our Google group and Facebook page. So we don't know. We don't know if this is going to work. We don't know if something is going to come of this. You never know what's going to be triggered in these kinds of discussions. It might be nothing. It might be productive and exciting. So that's it from me. We're not going to do justice to Pedro's article yet, but it just triggered so much thinking. And what I would kind of like to do is just hear from each person. I'd like to hear from Hoshila to begin with, because she's a kind of co-conspirator, if you like, in this effort. I'd like to hear from Pedro next. And then I really would like to hear from each person. So perhaps once Hoshila's chatted to us, once Pedro's chatted to us, then stick up your blue hand, and as soon as you stuck up your blue hand, we'll try to do, I'd love to hear from everybody. So let's see if we can just have a quick hello and think maybe about what this word lockdown triggers in you, and then maybe even start volunteering for running next week's session. Does that sound okay? Well, you know, you're all muted. You're not going to be able to tell me. I'm going to give over to Hoshila, and I'm going to mute myself, if I can.
Okay, hi everybody, and thanks for joining us here this morning. It's good to see the faces that we can and create a level of community. So Andrea and I were grappling with how do we respond to the VC's call in, what do we do in this time of COVID-19, and what is our response as a university community? And then, and I'll be upfront and admit it, we were both extremely nervous and anxious to do this virtual Zoom thing. And so thank you to all of you for being on it at the moment and supporting us. And then the next thing was, well, what are we going to talk about? What are we going to do? And I had emailed her Pedro's article, which came through last week, Tuesday, on the email. And I said, look, here's an article. I think it's a brilliant article and definitely a point of departure to start a conversation. For me, the article speaks directly to our chair, social cohesion and identities. And the word lockdown is a powerful word, and I'm sure we could speak about this for the rest of the year. So I'm not going to take up too much more time. And yeah, I think Andrea said if we could hear from Pedro now. So I think, Pedro, if you wouldn't mind putting on your camera and unmuting yourself, please.
Okay, thank you so much. Basically, the article is addressing three main points. The first one is that I think the reporting patterns of the media surrounding the lockdown in South Africa have been deeply racialized and also decontextualized. For instance, if you look specifically in how the incidents of the social grants period were being covered, it was presented as if people who stay in the townships and our rural communities do not care about their safety. They are misinformed about the COVID-19, and even worse, they are not stable, you know. So I found that not to be true. So it was important to nullify that discourse, because firstly, the administrative system that has been used by the government for people to collect their social grants wasn't designed by the people themselves. So them standing in those long queues is as a result of the administrative design of the collection points of social grants, not the other way around of blaming victims for standing in those lines like that. And secondly, the concentration of people in townships the way they are is as a result of the legacy issues of our economy and also our social structure in South Africa. The agenda of colonialism basically was to source as much cheap black labor into the urban areas that where the white property owning class under apartheid was running its economy from. So for that economy to run, because it was based on mining, manufacturing, agriculture, and so on, it was labor intensive. So you needed black people to be in close proximity to the urban area. So the closest place where they could be kept, it was in the townships as a big group at the same time, not far from the urban area, but far enough not to be in contact with white people. So that is why townships have a high concentration of the population of people like that. So those, the way people stay in those conditions, it's as a result of decisions that were not of their own choosing. But here's the interesting part. Even under such circumstances, underprivileged people have reconfigured their living conditions to be as fulfilling as possible. Because even under such township conditions, you still have functioning families, you still have children being raised into becoming citizens who contribute positively to the democratic project of our society. You have, you have a Springbok captain coming from those conditions. You have all manner of, wonderful outcomes that come from the resilience of people from those areas. There are even groundbreaking, innovative ideas, scientific discoveries, and new languages that were formulated out of those conditions. In fact, COVID-19 is not the first crisis those communities are faced with, you know. So when government says communities must go on a lockdown, townships have been on lockdowns for quite a long time, and through their limited resources and their own innovative strategies, they've managed to survive through those conditions. I'm talking about other lockdowns such as floods, other lockdowns such as poverty and unemployment. People have always survived those conditions. For instance, if you look at the data coming out of Stats South Africa for the fourth quarter of 2019, which is the latest document I have in front of me, they published that the unemployment rate of the Eastern Cape is standing at 36%. And then if you use the extended definition of unemployment, you would go up to 45% of unemployment. Now, you would know that any society that has an unemployment rate of 45%, there should be civil unrest in such a place. People should, that should be a place that has a humanitarian crisis of hunger, you know. But how is it that the Eastern Cape remains peaceful? How is it that people in the province continue to live, even though half of them are living below 900 per month? The answer to that is because these communities are involved in their own grassroots entrepreneurial ventures. So there are local informal economies that are existing in those communities that the media won't be able to pick up and report positively on and inform the country of how livelihood is sustained there innovatively, because for too long, the angle at which the media keeps reporting about those areas is to constantly reveal their service delivery protests, their crime statistics. It's always a presentation of gloom and doom of those areas, whereas there's so much more that is so wonderful about those places and how people live that is off the script, which I think if placed on the table, it could actually give us so many models of how to live. Now, lastly, if you look at the COVID-19 now, although it's a crisis, I argue that it is actually presenting us with a lot of opportunities to think things a bit more differently. For instance, I think we need to begin a discussion about what kind of an economic system or an alternative economic system should we pursue beyond COVID-19, because the current model that we've been using is not working in South Africa. It constantly locks us up into the, the constant crisis that we never seem to overcome. You know, the high rates of unemployment, the high rates of inequality, they're always there. And we've been having that experience for the past 45 years. So is there an economy that can be thought of which would move away from having a few who benefit at the expense of the many, you know? Because the way our current economy is structured, if you look at the data of the World Economic Forum, just in the past 15 years, we have produced, which is the world has produced more billionaires than it did in the past 100 years. So the past 15 years, in just a space of 15 years, the amount of billionaires has increased in an unprecedented levels. Yet at the same time, the levels of poverty have worsened in the last 15 years, right? So it tells you that if we continue with this pattern, then we won't have humanity in the next 20 to 40 years. So what could be the other ways of livelihood, the other alternatives that could ensure that the majority of the people that I'm talking about in the article who are pushed to the margins, they are able to form part of a sustainable economy. And by sustainable, I do not mean sustainable development the way liberal or bourgeoisie scholars use the word, the way CEOs use the word. I'm talking about sustainable development in a sense whereby you are able to have local economies that are self-generating, that have access to assets for the next 5, 15, 25, 35 years, where generations of those people can be able to benefit from them for generations to come. So,
Pedro?
So
Sorry,
that's
oh my God, did I jump in there? I'm going to kind of ask you maybe to just finish up now, because I'm sure there's lots of people dying to converse with you and kind of respond to you. Can I do that?
Yeah.
Sorry for my face jumping in there. Oh, goodness. Okay. Keep quiet.
Yeah, I was done. Thanks, Prof.
Okay, thank you so much. I mean, there were just so many things in there. I was just scribbling down like crazy. And then I realized, oh my gosh, I am recording this. I don't need to scribble, which is fabulous. So I think your article is fantastic. And I think that note that you ended on, that we need to reimagine something, and it has to be an economic reimagination, is something really important. Hoping that the oil scramble is going to also enable us to. But I would very much like to hear responses to Pedro. I don't want to hear myself. So I'm waiting for the first blue hand, and then you're going to put yourself on. It's a technical challenge. Do I know what a blue hand is? Apparently you can wave at me through the device of a blue hand. It's a challenge to all of you. Let's see who can do it. And then that's the person who would be allowed to speak. So I'm not seeing blue hands.
Andrea?
Yes.
So Gary had some form of a hand.
Oh, there's a hand. Adi, good. I see from my, there's a notice, well, let's get, but there's a notice that my meeting will end in 10 minutes. So obviously I am, okay, I am not technically good at this. So I'm going to see what will happen once they try to shut us up and see if I can redo the meeting. But I'm going to unmute Adi for now. How do we unmute you? And then the next, oh goodness me, Adi.
Hello. Hello.
Hi. If you speak, I think you will come into the video.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be a part of this meeting, and then I'm glad what we can do. It's been something that's been on my mind. Look at the continent all over. I've been so concerned about the possible ramifications of coronavirus, especially after we pass through this phase of flattening the curve. And then I think that Pedro did a fantastic job of covering what the situation is in a country like South Africa, similar outlook for things in Nigeria, although I would say that, because we do not have a residue of colonialists here in Nigeria, the diversity at some level does not appear to be. But from what we are seeing, it's obvious that there is a need for African countries, especially the big ones, Nigeria and South Africa, to rethink the way they want to structure their economies and to think of including more people in developmental goals and agenda.
Adi, sorry, I'm jumping in again. We're struggling, or I don't know if anybody else is, but we're struggling very hard to hear you because there seems to be a distortion on the line
you
for
can't hear me?
you. I think what we should do is perhaps, I don't know, try, I'm not sure what to do. I'm going to actually mute you because we're not able to hear you, and just test out whether we can hear other people, whether the distortion is still on everyone. So
can I come in on that? Because I'm on our Queen's Zoom, because I've been Zooming 8 hours a day. It's like Zoom. If the person that's speaking turns their video off, they are using less bandwidth, and that means that actually improves the quality of the audio considerably, because they're actually dragging themselves through the kind of mud of image showing.
Okay, thank you. So maybe, is there a way that I can actually just
I just shot the video now. Are you hearing me now?
That is better, yes, yeah. So a quick sum up, one sentence, because there's about another 20 people on our list here, and I'd very much like to hear from everybody. Maybe we can just do a quick run around with...
I was very difficult forcing the lockdown because millions people depend on their daily struggles to feed and survive, and then because of the economic situation, they really don't see coronavirus as a problem they need to confront. They consider hunger and poverty as more existential problems, and it's becoming a challenge for the government to manage. If we are going to be better prepared to manage pandemics in the future, it means that people need a reasonable level of education, a reasonable level of economic empowerment, so that we will be able to coordinate our responses better. In a situation where millions of people live in poverty, live in ignorance, it will be difficult, it will cost us more to manage pandemics of this nature, and we do not have any reason to believe that this will not happen some other time. So the way to sustainable development, the way to secure, to provide health security for all of us in the future is actually to ensure that we lift more and more people out of poverty across different lines. Maybe I should just stop there for now.
Andrea, you're muted.
Andrea, you need to
I see that. Okay, great. Now I'm unmuted. Thank you. All right. Okay. So who would like to respond? I don't see any hands. I sort of vaguely saw Gary's hand at some point. Maybe you can come in. Okay, I'm going to unmute you.
All right. Hi, everyone. Okay, so I'll just continue without the video link.
I think so, yeah. And maybe just because we might only have a few more minutes, and then I will do my very best to kind of reconnect us. But if not, then we will, I mean, this was a test run, just mostly a kind of technical test run. And we can carry on the conversation next time. Sorry, yeah.
Sure. Okay, so let me quickly raise a couple of things. I mean, I think I follow in terms of Pedro that the virus will emphasize or accentuate the current divisions within our society, and it runs on vectors in terms of that. Maybe just to add to his point, that it's interesting that middle-class people were the people that brought the disease to South Africa in terms of traveling, and whether that's significant or not significant. And middle-class people in terms of what they view on social media, they're talking a lot about the rioting and the looting and that, but nothing about the fact that it is their traveling that brought the actual disease to the country. So that was an interesting point for me. And I think that there's a couple of other things for me. The one is that a virus like this requires a societal response, not an individual, well, a societal response in the sense that we all have to do the same thing. We all have to stay at home. The individual in that, from a Western system, we come out of an individualistic type response, and that's not very useful in this period of time, because we all have to do the same thing. So it's the common versus the individual, and I think that that's a very interesting dynamic. And then the big question is what is useful information during this period? So the countries that acted early on good information seem to have beaten what they call the curve. But what is good information? So there's a lot of debate about whether we should reopen the economy. What's the impact on the economy? Is that good information? How do we judge it? And then the role of experts in this process. And I think the briefing by the Department of Health on Monday versus the briefings that you see from the US administration is a very nice contrast in terms of how you use experts in this process. And
our numbers are a good, sorry to jump in there, but our numbers are also a good, those graphs are quite a good comparison.
But you know, for us it's early days because we don't know yet where it is, and that so testing is one of the key things. But again, it's the question of data and how do you use data very effectively through this process. So I think that there were a couple of things that came through for me in this process. That's me.
Thank you. Who would like to? I'm looking for another blue hand. Or shall I?
And Andrea, sorry, can I just come in?
Please do.
Maybe we. So everybody, if you don't know what the blue hand is, if you scroll down to the bottom of your screen, then there's a bar that comes up there, and if you click on participants, there's a pop-up block that comes up, and at the bottom of the pop-up block on the right-hand side, it says raise hand. So if anybody wants to speak right now, just get onto that menu bar at the bottom and click the raise hand, and it should come through.
Fabulous. So Nsika wants to speak, and then Mary after that, and then Janet. Okay, so